I love the group that stays right till the end.
Exactly, the most important folks. So I promised Majority Whip Emmer and Lee that this would be by far the most exciting fireside chat of the conference, so you will be rewarded. And just hang on, those beers are on ice.
Sparks will fly?
Yeah, so very excited to have one of our leading advocates for the industry here and talk to him about the elections, things that are going to go on. First of all, I'll say on behalf of a Bitcoin miner here in America that is only 4 years old, first, just thank you on behalf of the industry and behalf of my company for all your efforts. And I can think of many things, but writing letters to the OMB to push back on EIA requests for miners, et cetera. We've always had a great advocate. So maybe as we get started, Whip Emmer, what even brought you to cryptocurrency in the first place? Like you're working on many different pieces of legislation. What first sparked your interest before we jump into the blood and guts of the election and what's going to happen on Capitol Hill?
It's a question I haven't been asked for a while, which is nice, Tyler. So I started in Congress. I just am wrapping up my 10th year. And in the first year, I've got this official office that is littered with Minnesota. I call them kids. They're adults, but I mean, the smart people are in their 20s and 30s in Washington, D.C. They occupy these offices, and my legislative director was a guy named Jason Fry, but Landon Zinda was handling, he's a Minnesota kid who was handling, I think he's at Coinbase now, was handling my financial services portfolio, and he, as I found out later, is a gamer. I don't come from that era. I'm an outdoors guy and all that stuff, but I got a whole bunch of kids. And I was just talking about it. Oldest, I've got 7 of them. The oldest one is going to be 34 next year, and the youngest one just turned 23 a couple days ago. But they clue you into a different world that's out there, so you don't lose touch with it. And Landon was one of them. It comes to me one day with a book called The Age of Cryptocurrency. I didn't realize he was a big crypto guy, and he gives me this book. What? You give me a book, I'm going to read it. And I read it, and I went back to Landon. The first thing I told him was, we got a problem with this book. I'm in Congress, and there are no pictures whatsoever. You got to have pictures for members of Congress. But in seriousness, I told him, this literally is what I've been fighting about for most of my adult life. It's about the opportunity for human beings to make their own decisions and self-determine. Finance is what, in my opinion, is what defines freedom. Your access to capital, your ability to make decisions on what risk you want to take, and the rewards that you're seeking to get. I mean, that happens only in this country. I mean, you don't have to know somebody in this country, although it's gotten more difficult over the last couple of decades. But this is that opportunity. And maybe I'll close it by doing it this way. When I was coming up, I became a Reagan Republican, and you had the audit the Fed people that grew into the Ron Paul type movement. And then you had these Keynesians who littered government, the people that believe that it's government that actually drives the economy. Well, the Keynesians have now morphed into something called the modern monetary theorists, which I'm not that smart, but I do know that if I throw an apple in the air, it's going to come down. So the idea that just because you control your own central currency and there's a formula that you can print and spend as much as you want without any consequence, I'm sorry, that's...
So then was it surprising to you that it became such, what seemingly was a kind of a niche topic, became a bigger topic in the recent election? I mean, maybe that's the answer, that it's really about freedom. It's not about...
So we just came to 2008.
Right.
Because those Ron Paul, audit the Fed, they became the Bitcoin crowd. Because this is the opportunity where we are going to do business peer-to-peer is the goal. And we're going to be able to make the decisions that are best for us. Now, what you ran up against in the 2010 to 2015, the central government is called the central government for a reason. And they try to protect their centrality. They want to be involved in all these transactions. So I think what happened from 2008 to about 2012, this is just going to go away. Look at these kids. They're doing so much fun. Let them have fun with their little play money. And then they got to like 2013, 2014, and they were like, uh-oh, we better do something about this. This isn't going away. This is growing. And so the next step was to try and bring you all in. Try to tell you that, hey, come on in. The water's nice. We'll be good to you. And you know what? That's not where the population is today. And when Donald Trump came into the office the first time, I thought we were going to make some serious progress. I mean, Brian Brooks was there. We had Hester Peirce. We had some allies that were ready to start moving this stuff. And then we ran into a real problem with the administration. They weren't interested in it. Biden comes in, and I'll be open about it. I thought it might get better for us. I thought, okay, well, these guys, they're going to be more progressive. They're going to want to look at this type of thing. I didn't realize how much Elizabeth Warren actually controls. Or I should say, the senator from Massachusetts who shall not be named. She and her colleagues like Gary Gensler, I know you're all disappointed. Gary's going to leave on January 20th next year. I think that's something we can all celebrate. I hope.
Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
I was just going to say, I hope he's moving fast.
So actually, this may lead towards, we'll get into some of the more blood and guts of maybe specific ideas that are going to be probably turned into legislature. But, you know, you are a vociferous advocate, and we certainly appreciate that. Obviously, a lot of politics ends up being compromises, and part of it is understanding the other side. Maybe you can help us, because I think a lot of us in the industry, one of the biggest challenges has been really before this election, trying to understand really like, why are we so unpopular with the party in power? And like, to the point where we have your favorite senator putting as her main sort of website, I'm building an anti-crypto army. For the life of me, trying to steelman the other side and understanding it, I can't find the piece of the electorate that appeals to. I mean, what do you, when you try to think about, I mean, you have to work with across the aisle sometimes. What do you think their end game is in that approach? Are they just anti-freedom? Is it that simple?
Yeah, she's trying to protect her market share. She wants to be in control. These central government folks, it's all about them being in charge of the system. And you and I, when we do business together, we got to pay the VIG. We got to pay the VIG to the boss, because otherwise they're going to send somebody from the IRS or the FBI. Well, a little sensitive right now. Yes, I know. But it's, I think what has happened here, my favorite movie of the last couple of years is Dumb Money. Because this to me is the younger generation saying, you know what? You guys keep telling us this is the way it's always been and this is the way it's got to be. We're going to show you that's not right. That's the new revolution that's taking place from the bottom up. And it's taken a while for Congress. The first hearing we ever had, Jeb Henserling from Texas was our chair. Republicans and Democrats on the committee all sounded the same. Oh, this is Silk Road. This is where all the drug dealers are. We had to, like, step by step, take it apart and tell them, cash is king, man. You can track all the other stuff. Cash is king. It's come light years. I mean, you just had a champion out here on the stage in French Hill, which is a great example, a traditional banking guy. And he has actually gone and learned this industry, and he understands the promise that it has. And it really is about, I know everybody here cares about how we put legislation in place, and we start to create rules of the road so people know what they're getting into. They don't have to be worried about getting slapped 6 months down the road by some unyielding bureaucrat. But we have to look at the fact that this is going to grow here if we let it. And I think that's what happened to Trump. Trump saw it. I mean, clearly he understands that a central bank digital currency is the antithesis to our banking system. I mean, literally, this is not just a surveillance tool. This would destroy the existing legacy banking system. The government would take it all over, and there's no turning back. He understood that. But then I think he also, Tyler, watched Vivek Ramaswamy when he was going across the country with his campaign, and he was seeing the energy that was coming out. You guys might have seen some of this. He announced, I think it was New Hampshire was the first time after that primary, he said, if I'm your president, there will be no central bank digital currency. And the reaction was incredibly strong. He tested again, I think, in North Carolina or somewhere else. But then the one that really got him was when he went to the Bitcoin conference in Tennessee, I think it was.
Most of us were there.
Yeah. I mean, Lizzie, who works with me, and she's out there somewhere, sent me the tape today because I've been meaning to watch it. I was told that he said he tested it. He does this. On my first day, I'm going to fire Gary Gensler. And everybody went crazy. So he decided, I'm going to go in again. And he says it again, and the blowback actually has him going, whoa, oh.
Right.
And I think that helped. And then I do think his family is also, and now you got JD. You know, when he picked JD,
right.
Everybody's talking to JD at the convention, and I just said to him, hey, I like you for a different reason. What's that? I said, you're going to be the first presidential or vice presidential candidate to ever have owned Bitcoin.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction.
Well, I agree. I mean, I can tell you just since the election, I think every entrepreneur in this country, not just in our sector, has a bit of a spring in their step. I mean, our company, we started in 2020 during the depths of the pandemic from my attic. I was the first employee, the first director, hired every service provider, and now we pay tens of millions of dollars in taxes to several states, including mostly in the great state of Texas, the federal government. We employ 45 families and put food on the table. It's a really, something we're very proud of as entrepreneurs, and it's just so refreshing to feel like the government's not necessarily going to be against us at every turn, often irrationally. So,
what's really funny about this, Tyler, is I have this theory that I think is proven out based on the election, that the media, which tries to direct us all, the human animals that we are, get us excited, get us depressed, get us energized to go out or stay home. I think they thought this was going to be the type of election that we've had the last 2 or 3 times, which I would call a personality election. Do you like this person? Do you dislike this person? And they try to create that. This was not a personality election. It doesn't matter. I don't care if you love the incoming president or you love the outgoing president or you hate both. Doesn't matter. People voted based on that.
I agree.
I'm not looking at the Republican-Democrat part of this. I'm looking at, all right, what is this one offering versus what that one is offering? And I think you brought it up. When you go on a podcast with Joe Rogan and you're talking to 100 million Americans, just as a person,
yes,
it makes a difference.
Yeah, it feels much like a less produced, packaged message. You have to get off script as you go deeper, and I think that's right. Well, so if we pivot to so we're moving from one approach from the previous regime to the new one. A question for you, and we can get wonky on policy if you want, but it may be even more interesting for those of us that are not politicians. How do you think now about prioritizing here? So like at least within our sector, there's many other issues, of course, outside of crypto, but you've worked on many pieces of legislation in the past, anti-CBDC things, obviously stablecoin legislation more broadly, market structure bill the market has talked about, repeal of different accounting standards for banks to help custody. I mean, it sort of runs the gamut, right? How do you kind of strategically and tactically, like for us non-politicians, how do you start? Do you dig out the old legislation? Do you just throw that away because now you've got a more supportive group to discuss? Do you try to put some sort of omnibus giant bill with all of that together? How do you think strategically about it?
Well, I mean, I'll give you my opinion, then tell you how it works with the committee. The committee actually, you got Republicans and Democrats on this committee that all agree on these issues. I mean, unfortunately, there's been a chair on the other side that she should be more accommodating, but I think it is, again, the senator from the state that shall not be named that encourages this stuff, because the members from the other side of the aisle, my colleagues, the vast majority of them are exactly where I am. I mean, Richie Torres is a great example, right? Yes. We couldn't be 2 more different human beings, where we come from, our lives, the way we live them, and yet when it comes to this issue, Richie once, Lizzie's out there, she'll smile, because she gave me an op-ed that he wrote, and I actually thought it was one that we were going to submit from me. I'm reading it, it's like, oh, this is perfect. Yeah, no, that's Richie Torres. It's like, wow. So I think you're going to have a group of people on both sides of the aisle. I mean, you probably saw the market structure vote. You had almost 70 from the other side of the aisle come across,
right, including
Nancy Pelosi, which I thought my favorite tweet on that was, of course she did. She's a really good investor. But I think for me, it's a lot of the stuff that we've done over the last 8 years, we've gotten better at it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that you want to go all the way back 8 years.
Right.
But there are certain areas that we've been trying to educate by putting these bills out there, knowing that we were going to run into opposition. I would start, the first one is the most recent. I would start by putting into law the prohibition against our government creating a central bank digital currency, so there can never be any confusion again. They are not going to be able to build the surveillance system and watch our finances. Once you get past that, I think it is, and I'd reverse them. We did the market structure bill this time, which I was pleased. I told you that there were issues, because I think these bills should be drafted from Main Street, so from where you guys are to Washington. Unfortunately, the people that are involved in actually drafting the language are typically looking from Washington at you. So they're trying to give the regulators authority. They're trying to, literally put themselves in a position where I wrote the law, I'm going to work for a law firm someday, you're going to call me because I'm the one who knows the law. And I don't want it to sound that awful, but we're human beings. This is what happens. People, even in their subconscious, are motivated by personal interest, whether they realize it or not. These bills have to be written from the street to the government, not on behalf of the government. They got to be written on behalf of the individual who's trying to do these things. You're going to need a market structure bill, which I think the one we have, it could probably be improved. I would argue we should work on it a little bit more, but it's good, because you've got to have some rules of the road, and it's got to be in law. The stablecoin legislation, as I was telling you, is what I think is the biggest one. We got to get it right. We got to make sure that we can have foreign-issued stablecoins as long as the issuer will subject themselves to the requirements and standards of the whatever the Treasury requires as a reserve, which, by the way, I think Congress has to be a little bit more prescriptive. We need to tell them what those requirements are, rather than allowing one administration to define it one way and come in and somebody else defines it another way. Put some certainty in. But I think those, to me, those three things are the top things. And then you got a whole smattering of other stuff that.
I think the biggest thing from the industry's perspective is it's just so refreshing to hear that what I think is an appropriate reversal of the directionality of thinking about how to frame out that legislation, exactly as you said, rather than a top-down central control. I mean, if anything mirrors sort of what Bitcoin represents, it's sort of open source things are very robust.
That's right.
And sort of almost like a crowdsourced, open-sourced way of doing things is actually a more robust structure. A lot of incumbents obviously don't like being disrupted and get scared, but to your point about stablecoins, I think people worry initially, politicians often worry initially about dollar dominance, when in fact, stablecoins, dollar-based stablecoins would have probably the opposite effect.
Oh no, it'd be like Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall.
Yeah.
Because you can look all around the world. That cab driver down in Brazil would love to do business in dollars. Can't do it right now. But if you have a dollar-backed stablecoin, you're telling me that he's not going to use that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's you're absolutely correct. That's what would happen.
What, you got 300 and some million people right now on the hook for $36 trillion in debt, which needs to be addressed. But at the same time, you do this, you have the right stablecoin legislation, you could have that covered over 500 million people, 600 million people around the world. So, no, I think it is really big, and it's why, like, Nigeria apprehended detained a couple of our friends because they want to control their central currency, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think freedom is a popular thing around the world, and it's a scary thing to authoritarian regimes. but it is a more robust system.
Well, the other thing, though, about this is the decentralization puts you in charge, which obviously, when did the government actually innovate?
Right.
The government isn't the innovator. The innovator is the entrepreneur, which is why we've got to make sure these rules are in place so the entrepreneurs can say, yeah, I can do that. I mean, we wouldn't have had an FTX if we actually had a structure that people could look at and say, well, we got to do business in the U.S.
Even if it was a tougher government to deal with, just one that was open to engagement.
Yeah.
Take a meeting. I mean, you know, some of the
Gary
stories...
says his door's always open. You don't want to go through it because you'll probably get a letter right after you leave.
So if we switch gears a little bit, obviously the new administration will have a big impact on this across the board. Have you spoken to the president-elect since the election? I imagine you have.
I've communicated with the president. He's a little busy, as you might expect.
I can imagine.
And by the way, I think he's doing a great job. It's amazing. You have someone from the outside who came in 2016 and was learning. It appears to me that we have a president-elect who knows exactly why he was elected and what he is supposed to be doing, which is literally shaking up that calcified, you know, these agencies that don't work. I mean, you've got agencies, I swear, what's the one we were talking about yesterday? I think they're still on the 1970s MS-DOS program.
The COBOL, yeah.
This is ridiculous.
Can't find a programmer for COBOL.
Yeah, it's time to, and by the way, they'll tell you that we can't, it's too hard, we got to study it. Get ready with Elon and Vivek and others. Their world's not going to be what it's been, which is why I'm so energized.
We're pretty excited about it. Now, going to ideas that sort of, I guess they're newly proposed, but they haven't been traditionally debated yet, at least in depth, until really the election cycle. What are your thoughts around, and I know it's early days, and Senator Lummis has some ideas that she's proposed around the concept of a Bitcoin reserve. I think there's still some question as to exactly what that means and so forth, but have you had any thoughts around that so far, or waiting to sort of see what gets proposed?
No, I mean, I was telling you backstage that, I mean, Cynthia is a champion for this stuff. You've got a whole bunch of them, right? And you'll see more of us, although you probably won't see me because I just go after the bad regulators and it's more about people that they're able to do this. The Whip can do what I do in committee and with the industry, but we need people like Cynthia and the others that are out there. The strategic Bitcoin reserve, I just like starting with stop auctioning it off. Mm-hmm. Let's just stop that. And then let's change the rules, by the way, the de minimis rules for human beings so they can start to use their Bitcoin in normal transactions.
Right, I guess there's been talk about capital gains taxes and
I'm a huge safe harbor and tax guy where you can do things, or sandbox guy, where I hate that term though. Makes it sound so childish, right? But the idea is you should be free to create. You should be free to take risk and see what you can, because the whole goal is my self-interest might end up feeding 45 families at some point and growing all kinds of different opportunities for my community. So I think we do those things. I think the strategic reserve, I don't know how it's going to be defined because I'm with you. It's a great term. It sounds really important. But let's just start by stop auctioning this stuff off.
Well, you know, we're cherry picking, I suppose, dates because we've made several consecutive all-time highs here on Bitcoin. Someone feel free to shout out if we hit 100,000 while we're on stage.
I told you when Gary announced his retirement, it should hit 100.
Lee promised while we were on stage it would happen, so hopefully he's market buying, smashing that market buy button. But, you know, to your point, you know, the German government sold off a bunch of Bitcoin this summer in a hurry. You know, the billions of dollars they left on the table are now looking, I'm sure, like they wish they had not done that.
Without a doubt.
So hopefully that will continue to evolve. So we're coming towards the end, but I guess broadly speaking, if we speak to the other big topic, I think folks in here that are operating data centers in Texas. This has become a big topic, the energy grid, energy policy.
Yeah.
How do you think overall about President Trump and the new administration's approach to this? Do you have any early day thoughts as these questions around the grid, expansion, regulation, unleashing American energy, and any thoughts on that topic for this audience?
I think the miners, I think everybody who's involved in this, you're the solution. You're not the problem, you're the solution. And I think the administration that you're going to have incoming are going to recognize it as that. I don't think we're going to get from our energy secretary, I really don't think that he's going to issue an edict that you got to start reporting all this stuff, which, by the way, the last one did.
Under an emergency order. It couldn't go through normal APA procedures.
It had to settle with the different lawsuits and say, yeah, we really don't need that now. Well, you never needed it to start with. And it's just another attempt to demonize or vilify the industry that, oh, you're using, you know, there's more energy consumed to create dollar bills.
It's
and
an
nobody
excellent
talks
point.
about that.
Trucking around pennies.
Yeah,
if you want.
and I mean, talk about dirty energy, right?
Yep, absolutely. Well, look, it feels like we could talk all night. This is a fascinating discussion. On behalf of everyone in the industry, thank you so much for your advocacy and support. Ladies and gentlemen, Majority Whip Tom Emmer.
Thank you. Thanks. And everybody enjoy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.